Kelly with citracycles.ca. I'm here with the Boar from the Vancouver company Surface 604. This is actually a long-term review of the fat bike, the electric fat bike. I've been riding it since January, so it's 4 months, and that's given me an opportunity to try it out in a variety of weather, lots of rain and wet here, and variety of trails. And I have to say that after riding it for 4 months, it is a really fun bike. Now, a lot of times with a fat bike, it, to be honest, rides like a tractor, but not the Boar. They've put a lot of thought into the geometry and into the gearing, into the components, and it is just fun to ride. It's actually agile, which is surprising for a fat bike, but it works really well. And I'll just go over some of the features of the bike, but it's one of those things that looking at it, you can't really tell how much fun it is until you actually ride it. But as I mentioned, this is an electric fat bike, so we have the 8-fun rear hub motor here, and I was actually really pleasantly surprised by this rear hub motor. Part of that would be because of the quality that they've chosen. This is a second generation, and I think Surface 604 really puts a lot of effort into quality control. I've actually ridden a number of e-bikes with that 8-fun motor, and I've definitely run into problems in the past with it being unreliable and noisy, but in this case this has been an excellent motor. I think in addition to the quality control that they're putting into it, the other big thing that really made this a joy to ride is they've got a torque sensor you can see right down here. So a lot of the bikes with this type of motor use magnets on the crank, and basically that detects that you're pedaling and then turns the motor on. With the torque sensor, it can actually sense how much input you're putting, how hard you're pedaling. So that's really important. If you are out on a trail and you need power to climb a hill, you pedal hard and the motor knows you're pedaling hard and it matches that power. When you are on a trail and you've got a cliff on one side and trees on the other side, the last thing you want to do is turn your crank and have a sudden surge of power. Because of this torque sensor, you're not going to get that. If you turn your crank and you're just pedaling very lightly, then the power that's going to come is also light. So it's proportional to the power that you're using. In other words, it's just like riding a bike. You're not having to worry about the amount of power because the bike essentially senses how much power that you need and gives that power to you. I'll just install the battery here. You can see from this side, you almost can't even tell where the battery goes. It's actually integrated right into the frame here, which is a really nice feature. So it is removable. For charging, you can charge it off the bike. You can see on the bottom here, there is a little flap that covers the charge port, and there's also a standard USB connection there, so you can actually power another device. Now, you don't have to take it off the bike to charge it. You'll notice that when I put it on the bike here, and it locks in. And by the way, there's a key that's required to remove it, and the key doesn't have to stay in to ride the bike, which is really nice. You can see I can still access the charging port while it's on the bike here. And they did a nice job of integrating that into the frame. The power here on the battery will also give you an indication of the level with the LED display there. And when you unlock it, you just pull this out to unlock the battery from the frame. And if we come back to this side, you can see they've done a really good job of integrating that into the frame. Okay, so I've powered it up, and of course you can use the power key on the control pad here to turn it on and off, in addition to the power button on the battery. So we have our level up and down buttons here, and also our I button to switch through the display here. So you can see a trip counter, total counter on the odometer, the maximum speed as well as your average speed, and then back to the trip distance. And right now we're on level 1. It has 5 selectable levels, so I just press the up button to get to level 5, and I can level down as well. This is by default set to taper off the motor around 32 kilometers an hour as required by law. There is a password protected mode that you can go in and override that, but it's beyond the scope of this video. You can see some nice grips on here as well. And we've got the Tektro hydraulic disc brakes, and really on an e-bike with this amount of power, if you are riding anywhere with hills and even on flats when you've got that kind of power, I definitely recommend the hydraulic disc brakes, and it gives you a lot of stopping power and very low maintenance as well. And we've got the SRAM X5 shifters on the front here, and we've got actually a 10-speed cassette on the back here, and again your SRAM shifters. And from my experience, shifting is very smooth, no problem shifting under load. Even with the motor on, I haven't had any problems at all. It's shifting quite well, and the gear ratio is really well done here. So if I'm on a big climb with a bike off on some trails, I get it up into the granny gear and I haven't had any problems. But once I'm on the flat stretch, maybe around town or on a commuter trail, when I can get into my smaller gears there, I really find that I can keep a nice cadence. So they've done a really good job of calculating those gear ratios. Going back up top here, you can see it does have a rigid fork, and that's not unusual on a fat bike, especially since you can get your air pressure on these Kenda tires down to 10 psi, no problem, maybe even a little less than that. And actually the rating on it is actually 5 psi, so that absorbs a lot of the shock for you. But they have designed the bike in mind with putting suspension forks on. So for example, as an upgrade, we do have the RST Renegade, which is a really nice suspension fork you can throw in there if you're doing a lot of off-road. You can see down here we've got the through axle, we've got the decent sized disc brakes on the front here and on the rear as well. And really it's quite the stealth bike, because if you look, you know, the cassette pretty much covers up the motor, so, and the battery integrated in the frame like that, it really doesn't stand out as an e-bike. Now the bike itself does stand out, partly because, well, this one's green. You can also get black and white, but also these tires. Everywhere I go, people say, wow, look at those tires. And these are the 26x4. You can upgrade to a larger size tire. I think it's a 26x4.5 if you want. I've been really pleased with these tires so far, and in fact, in my other reviews, if you go to citruscycles.ca, you can see some of the terrain that I've covered with the bike, and my experiences on poor traction control and that sort of thing. Now, you may think to yourself that a fat bike is just for snow and sand, and of course it performs very well in that mix. I had the opportunity to do both and handles itself really, really well. But what really surprised me about the fat bike is that it actually makes a great commuter or urban bike. And that may seem strange to you, but I'll just point out a couple of things here. First of all, you can get these beautiful custom-made aluminum fenders, and I did have them on for a while. I just took them off to do some serious testing with off-roading for another video. But with the fenders on, you do get full coverage, front and rear tires, so you really can stay dry, and I can attest to that as I rode this this winter on Vancouver Island, and we get a lot of rain in January and February. So certainly that's a nice feature. And you can also get front and rear racks, which I'll show you in a moment, and those racks can support up to 100 pounds each. So in terms of using it as a commuter bike, what the great thing about this is that you have exceptional stability. So if you want to load up groceries, you can do that, and you're not worried about handling, because with the rear rack, and even with the front rack, although I try to put most of the weight on the rear rack, putting 100 pounds on there on this bike is no problem. With these fat tires like that, and the geometry of the bike and the motor, you really don't have to worry about any sort of instability. It just works really, really well. But the other very interesting thing about a fat bike like this is the traction control that you have. So this is really like the SUV of bikes. So if there's if it's wet and the road's slick, or like a few times this winter I was riding on frost, which is quite slippery, or you get some loose gravel, you really don't have to worry about it, because if you bring your tire pressure down, you know, to anywhere between 10 and 20 psi, you have loads of traction and you really have no problem. Even with stopping, I was really surprised. You've got the hydraulic disc brakes and those wide tires. You can grip a lot of the road and stop really easily. And when you combine that with the agility of the bike, it really becomes an awesome commuter urban bike, because it gives you the stability and the traction that you would need on any type of road. Okay, I've mounted the rear rack here, and this is actually a custom-made aluminum rack. Quite heavy duty, supports up to 100 pounds, which is pretty awesome. Very easy to mount. You've just got the 4 bolts here, one here, one up there, and of course the 2 on the other side as well. This, by the way, is a mounting point for a trailer. It doesn't come with and isn't necessary for the rack itself. There's actually 2 thicknesses of tubing here for different sized pannier bags, and you've got the top rack as well that you could put a trunk bag on. But 100 pounds is really nice that you can support that. I didn't mount the front rack, but as you can see, it actually is really easy to do. Just line it up here, and you can see down here there's 4 bolts that'll go in on each side of the fork, and then that one also supports up to 100 pounds and is quite a convenient way to transport anything.